I'm Paula Green D'Amico, and welcome to Make a Long Story Short, the podcast. Every one of us has a story to share. Some of us have a short story, others a novel, and still others a trilogy, maybe a trilogy times two. One thing is for sure, every day is an adventure. All we have to do is open the door and let life come in. Welcome to the new normal, or as I like to call it, hashtag reset button. COVID-19 has brought us to a whole new place. Actually, it's brought us back to a place where we used to be. Simpler times, quieter times, more family time, more time to think, write, create, love. More time to do the things that we've been asking for time to do. And time to just sit still. But sitting still for me and a few of my other friends, not so easy. They are ready to share their stories with you in a special edition of this podcast. May these stories make you smile, give you hope, inspire you, and lift you up. So while life is on pause, why don't you sit back, relax, hit the play button while we make a long story short. Diana Dibble has been in business for nearly 2 decades. She is the president and chief motivator at Design to Delivery Incorporated. That's an essential business, which means her business is one of the lucky ones that have been able to continue operating during the COVID-19 crisis. This powerhouse of a minority-owned, woman-owned, small business, along with her business partner, Molly Grimmel, provides full-service government contracting services to small business. That's a mouthful, but again, it's also essential. I had the pleasure of interviewing Diana back in February, but a lot has changed since then, and this seasoned business owner has some incredible insight on how business has changed and how life has changed too. So, there's this thing called COVID-19 that popped up.
Never heard of it.
And I want to know, how has it changed your business? What are you doing? How are you getting through? Talk to me about that.
Actually, because we're an essential government contractor, it has not changed our business for the negative. It's been a positive because people can't go anywhere. They're not taking their PTO. So revenue is up. How it's changed us though is that because I am one of those people who watch a lot of science fiction movies, I kind of saw this coming. And we started in February making sure that all of our people could telework. And some of our contracts had to be modified in order to allow for that. It's been hard in the sense that my job has tripled because I'm not only doing my regular job, I have to keep up with all the government legislation as it's coming from like the Department of Labor and stuff. And in the middle to end of March, that was changing almost on an hourly rate basis. So that became a full-time job with the CARES Act, those kind of things. But then I also have to monitor what's going on at the state level, and we're in 5 different states. So from an operational standpoint, it's been super, super, super hectic. I mean, up the first month I was working 15-hour days, probably 6 days a week, maybe 7 in some cases. So it's all of that, plus on top of having 2 elderly parents who are right in that demographic, a sister with underlying health issues and a brother with underlying health issues, and making sure that they're safe and making sure I don't get sick because there's nobody that can do my job. So it's been hectic like that. And then also, I think in some cases there's survivor's guilt, if you will. There are companies out there that are being crushed by this and trying to maintain a sense of, what's the word? Decorum, if you will. I mean, you don't want to complain to your friend about, oh my God, I'm working so much and on when they haven't been able to work for weeks and months. So there is maintaining that balance. has been kind of a challenge. My parents live probably like 15 minutes from me, and I have only seen them once in the last 3 months because I'm trying to stay away, because I still have to go to the office to make sure, there's been a couple times the servers have gone down. I have to go and make sure that those are up and running. And we're still getting mail, so making sure that we're responding to the government paperwork that comes in, because they're still mailing it.
Right.
And having to do that. So it gets me out of the house. And I have a gym that we put into the office several years ago when we closed down our wellness center. Mm-hmm. So since all the gyms are closed, it gives me an opportunity to either go and get on my bike on the trainer, or get on the treadmill and try to get some exercise. Because I think that's been one of the things too, is you find that since your routine is so disrupted, that your body starts breaking down. So trying to address that part as a way to manage the mental stress has been something I have to personally be aware of, because I'm not very good at it.
Well, so you're primarily working at home, right?
Yeah, there's ups and there's positives and negatives about that, because I find I'm much more productive when I'm home, but that also means that I don't have the hey, you've been sitting for 12 hours. Why don't you maybe, I don't know, go get some breakfast? Yeah. Because it's 8 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. And I just did a newsletter, cover letter we do a monthly newsletter to our employees. And one of the things that I was doing is as a way of maintaining productivity when you're working at home. Because for most people, you don't work at home. You work in an office, you go in for 9 hours, you take an hour lunch, and you go home and you do whatever. Now you're home. A lot of cases, people are homeschooling their children. So they're trying to maintain their productivity while they're dealing with this. So one of the things I said, having routine is really important. Getting up and going to bed at the same time. Getting dressed. I mean, who knew that not wearing sweatpants and workout clothes every day could be detrimental? And then there's that thing about, zipping up pants to make sure that they still fit. Planning out meals, because I know when I first came home, I was like, yay, I'll have time to cook, because I never seem to have time to cook. Now, 2.5 months into it, I'm like, I'm really kind of over this. But I find if I plan meals and then I know what's going on, then I don't snack as much. So that's been something that I think can be helpful to people when you are in a situation that's so unusual. We've also, for our parents that have kids at home that they have to homeschool, we've worked with them to modify their schedules and been very flexible with it. Where that also benefits is now that everybody's home, everybody is logging into the remote systems of the government at the same time. So it was creating a load that they couldn't handle. So we're like, okay, we can give people flexible hours so that they can get their work done, and it takes some of the burden off of the government systems.
So when things kind of go back to, well, it'll never be the same, but when we go back to the workplace, mm-hmm. will that change? Will what you're doing with your employees, some of those things might be instituted, do you think?
Funny that you should ask that question, because it's something I'm actually working on, a return to work plan that will look at what the CDC is requiring and the WHO, because we're using that in terms of guidelines. We'll also have to see what the government has to say. But there's also OSHA requirements that any return to work plan has to take into consideration. So one of the things, I was talking to one of our program managers who manages our Indiana contract, where we have another location. We have to wait on guidance from the government. But in terms of opening our location, my question was, where are everybody's desks? And he said, most of them are six feet apart. So that 6 feet distance that they're calling for social distancing, requiring people to wear masks. But one of the things that we're talking about is a phased approach, so that we'll figure out, let's say there are 4 people in a room. The 2 that are catty corner to each other may come in on Mondays and Wednesdays. The other 2 may come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then everybody works at home on Fridays. looking at things like that. In the corporate office, we normally have our staff meeting in everybody in one room. Instead, what we'll say is put on headphones. We're going to do it by Zoom with everybody in their office. But really, it's also a matter of, one, what are people's comfort levels in terms of returning to the workplace to make sure that they feel safe and comfortable when they come back. We're waiting on guidance from legal counsel because we really want to provide masks to everyone. And she's like, unless there's a government order or a customer order, and if there is, we need to talk because of liability. So trying to protect the company and protecting the employees at the same time, making sure that those marry together is going to be something that has to be looked at very closely.
There are a lot of small businesses here in the Western New York area that the owners are women business owners are hungry to learn how to set up their business in preparation for the reopening. So what were your resources? Where did you go?
Fortunately, I have a really good legal counsel, so they've been sending out emails, but I monitor what the state and municipality websites are putting out in terms of guidance. There's also going to be the challenge for especially retail businesses or businesses that are brick and mortar of pushback from people that don't want to wear masks. And how do you handle wanting to have people to come into your store to shop and trying to institute safety guidelines? How do you handle that in terms of the public coming in and maybe want to do something different? So one, I suggested people to talk to their legal counsel to find out what they can do. The last thing people want to do is be on the butt end of a negative PR campaign that just goes through social media.
Right.
But it may be that all of the employees working in the brick and mortar location wear masks and stuff, and the public does what they will. I think the bigger question is how long will we stay open when we reopen? Because there's scientific reports that are coming out that we may see a second wave in the fall. Or states open up and then there's an uptick, and real quick they say, okay, we've got to go back to quarantine. So I had a conversation the other day with a friend of mine who's actually has a branding company, and she's like, I'm a photographer, like what am I supposed to do? So we were coming up with ideas. So this is a really good opportunity for people who are either looking to open a business or reopen a business to say, how can I take what I'm doing currently? And, you and I have talked previously about pivoting the business. How can I change how I'm offering my services to the public? And I have a great example of that. There's a woman by the name of Alicia Russman who owns Undeniable Boutique. She's one of our NABO members here in Greater DC. She's a clothing store. So when everything shut down, it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? She already had a retail presence. An online presence. So she was really pushing the virtual appointments, what they were doing online, but she pivoted some of the things she was offering, and she's now offering masks that other small businesses are producing. So she's helping out another small business. She's getting sales coming in, but she's also doing public service by having these available for people to buy. She's doing okay, but it's really, I think the scary thing for people who have brick and mortar is, how do I make these rent payments? Talking to your banker, your accountant, with the programs that were offered. There was the PPP and EIDL. The other thing I think is to also reach out to people from an emotional level. There's a lot of emotions, especially there's fear, there's anger, There's numbness that's all coming along with this. And I know several weeks ago, I had a huge meltdown because I was, I have it under control, we're ahead of it. And finally, it all just kind of came in, and I just vomited it all over my business partner. And she's like, what the hell? But we talked through it. And I think a big thing that got me past was acknowledging how much anger and fear I had because of everything that's going on. I mean, you don't know if you're going to walk out of the house fine one day and come back home, exposed.
Right.
So when you have all that and you have a business that you're trying to either run or start, that's a whole nother kettle. So I really encourage people to talk to friends and mentors or health professionals if you need it, because this is nothing like any of us, well, I shouldn't say any of us, most of us who haven't been around, who weren't around for the 1918 flu pandemic. There are people still walking around who did experience that. They're very old, but, there are. So none of us have anything that we can reflect back on. 9/11 didn't have the same type of thing because, one, this is so protracted with the number of people that have succumbed to it. But there was still that same kind of uncertainty and fear that we had back in 9/11, and we made it through there.
So after your meltdown, was it a big release for you? And then you were able to kind of like circle back around, take a deep breath, and go on? Or is there something that you've been doing since the meltdown to kind of keep that balance for yourself?
So there was a great sense of relief after. I mean, it was almost like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was very, very positive. And I noticed that I had stopped writing in my gratitude journal, which is very helpful because even after a really, really bad day, to be able to say, okay, what good happened? That's been really helpful. One of my employees, our business operations director who works for me, says, woosah, woosah. So I was doing woosah, and that was helping up until that point. And I called her, I said, woosah's broken. So now there's a movie called Anger Management and Goosefraba.
Ah.
So I've been doing Goosefraba, which actually I think is better than woosah because it's more syllables.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. So I notice when I start to feel like I'm holding my breath or feeling really, really anxious, Goosefraba. Mm-hmm. And I think that something that was really, really important is, you feel like you have to hold it together for people because you don't want your mishigas to start contributing to the collective. And in our Monday staff meeting with the corporate staff, I finally said to him, I said, look, I'm having a hard time with this. This is really, really stressful and on and on. So all together collectively, we did deep breathing.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I think as a business leader, I think it's good to let your staff know that you're human, that you're not some superhuman where, it's not affecting you. This really affects me. We have almost 100 people, and every day I worry about them and their families for them to be okay. And that's a lot to take on as an individual. So to be able to spread it out to other people and, acknowledge it and have them acknowledge it makes a really big difference. One of the things that I do every day, I sit outside, and I have for years and years, and that's my stress buster. Go outside and you will be surprised by the quiet, the lack of cars honking. And I think with, the pollution has been down just, worldwide. And I've seen so many more animals. There's so many birds in the backyard and everything. And I think that regardless of what people's circumstances are, whether you're working, your business, you're like, oh my God, or you're trying to start, but whatever it is, if you can take a moment outside in the quiet, away from technology, because I think we really we've got Zoom, we've got social media, we've got all these externals. Mm-hmm. and get away from it for a little bit and kind of take a step back, it's really quite beautiful.
When you sit still outside and you don't hear what you used to hear, which was, the honking of horns and traffic and people yelling, and so now you're actually hearing the breeze in the trees and kids and the giggling of children, and you might even hear a bee buzzing by, and you're just hearing like nature be nature, which is like amazing, which that in and alone, like you said, just sit outside, take a moment, take a deep breath in, that just kind of like grounds you and makes you feel.
Yeah, and acknowledge that, everyone keeps saying, when are we going to get back to normal? That normal is gone.
Yeah.
You could almost equate it to people who are married and they have problems in their marriage, and they're like, you know what, I'm committed to making this work, and on and on. One of the things I read once from a real prominent relationship expert was, you have to understand that relationship that you had before whatever event prompted all of this does not exist any longer. You got to start fresh and create from that point forward. So I think if we stop saying, when are we going to get back to normal, to, okay, what's the new normal going to look like? Because, we won't be pining for it. Or if you want, I'm a sci-fi superhero movie fanatic. Avengers Endgame, when Thanos came back and said, I know what my mistake was. I only wiped out half of the world, so the other ones that stayed kept pining for the way things used to be. I'm going to go back and wipe everybody out and start over, just start fresh. And the Avengers were like, that's not going to happen. And they defeated him. And so they all had that new normal after the snap, and everybody came back, because there were those who vanished into dust and were gone for 5 years, and those who stayed, and then they all came back. So that was the new normal. So if we look at it in the lens of the Marvel people, we're all going to come back after the snap and have to make a new normal.
Right.
And that might be easier for people than trying to figure out, how do we go back? What's the new normal going to look like, and how do we accommodate and cope with that?
Yeah, I look at it as for a lot of people, it's a fresh start. People do not get this opportunity very often.
Yeah, and all my friends here now have a different appreciation for teachers. Let me tell you, they're all like, oh my God, now I know why they sent those notes home about my child. They're horrible. Like, oh, I could have told you that. But it's also allowing them to have hands-on and with homework and assignments, where before maybe the kids were doing it. So there's a lot of good that has come out of it. Families are spending more time together because, they're not going 800 miles an hour at 180 degree directions. People are home and doing more as a family. So there is good. It's horrible what's happened.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't wish this on anybody. And, my heart goes out to the families that have been affected by this, either with illness or, oh my God, death, because they are forever changed. So, I think we should have compassion for the number of people that have been affected by this, not only here in our country, but worldwide.
A big thank you to Diana Dibble from Design to Delivery Incorporated for sharing her insight in this edition of To Make a Long Story Short. But that's just a fraction of Diana's story. Diana says that she is what you call a reluctant entrepreneur. That is, until she had that aha moment. You know what I'm talking about.
This woman, who I had so much respect for, who was smart, she knew numbers, she was our general manager, and she was a force, and she was this little itty bitty thing. And I just had so much respect for her. And she looked at me, she said, just because you have a theater degree doesn't mean you can't do anything you set your mind to. And that changed everything.
In the next edition of To Make a Long Story Short, find out how Diana went from dancer to a successful business owner. I'm Paula D'Amico, and you've been listening to Make a Long Story Short, the podcast. You can follow all of my life stories on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and on pauladamico.com and blessingsbynature.com. You can even find me on YouTube. Join me next month as we make a long story short.